Well, you know what they say about New York City? It's a city that never sleeps. Like to wake up in the city that never sleeps to find I'm king of the hill, top of the heap. Well, that's one side of New York for sure. But these days, there's another side to the city. In some ways, it feels like it's going back in time to the bad old days of the 1970s, where crime was rampant and people were afraid. There was actually an exodus from New York. Property values fell, if you can believe it. Rudy Giuliani turned the city around by cracking down on big crime like the mafia and little crime too. His policies were maintained in large part by Mayor Bloomberg, but in the years since, well, I have to say the city is regressing. It's a pain to see it. It hurts the heart. Such a beautiful city. Well, what am I talking about? Well, here's one example. Hundreds, thousands of migrants streaming into the United States illegally have just taken up to the camping, really, on the streets of New York, or sometimes being put up in hotels. I won't tell you the story. To go to the streets of New York, to have it told by someone who is right there, literally right now in his car. We talked to Leroy Johnson, an independent journalist in New York, and you can follow him as I do on Twitter, and we'll put his Twitter account on the screen. Leroy, great to finally meet you. I follow you on Twitter, so I feel like I know you. You're always on the streets looking for the news in the Big Apple, aren't you?
Thanks for having me on, Ezra. Yeah, I'm an independent reporter from New York City. I stay local, and I try to look for any news in New York City, anywhere from crime to the migrant issue, to protests. And you're right, New York City is starting to change a little bit, and it's getting a little more wilder. And you're correct. People have left New York in droves just because the way the streets are changing here, and they're scared, and the taxes, and just the way New York is changing so drastically in the wrong direction. Recently, I've been covering the migrant crisis, and I'm like the migrant reporter from New York City. And it's getting out of hand right now, completely out of hand. You had hundreds and hundreds of migrants sleeping outside in the super hot weather overnight on the streets. And God forbid one of these guys died, and that'll be the end of us. We would have riots if they died. So yeah, like I'm an independent reporter from New York, and anything New York I cover.
And I follow you. I mean, it really is interesting what goes on the streets of that city. And by the way, I find it depressing. I mean, I remember New York City at its safest, when it was the safest big city in America. What a great pleasure. And people were confident and happy and carefree. And by the way, I think some of the crime wave that's sweeping New York is coming to Toronto and Vancouver and even other cities in Canada too, let alone other American cities. Let me ask you, though, about the phenomenon you just described. And I don't think that I would put being homeless or migrants on the street in the same category as some of the wild crimes we've been seeing lately. But can you tell me a little bit about where these migrants came from? Did they come in directly to New York? Did they come in from the southern border and then make their way to New York City? How did these, I think there's thousands of international migrants, wind up in Manhattan? What was their route?
So a lot of them are from different countries around the world. We have them from Russia, China, Africa, Venezuela, Mexico, all over the world. What they do is a lot of them make their way to the southern border and then cross the southern border and either get on a plane and come here or get on a bus and come here. So that's the route I've been getting from most of the migrants. And some of them actually told me they walked for thousands of miles to get here. And some of the stories I hear, Ezra, is horrible from these guys.
I mean, they may be telling the truth. I mean, once they get to the southern border, to get a plane ticket costs some money and you need some ID to get on a plane. Are some of these people being shipped to New York by, say, the governor of Texas or the governor of Florida? I know they wanted to sort of put the problem at the doorstep of Democrat politicians because, you know, it's easy for a Democrat politician to say, I have a sanctuary city when they're 1,000 miles away from the border. So I think one of the moves by those border state Republicans was, all right, we'll test your commitment. Here's a video clip that drives me nuts whenever I see it. This is the mayor, I think, of Philadelphia celebrating the new sanctuary city status. This was a few years ago. He's literally doing a happy dance. Here, take a quick peek at that.
A sanctuary city, yeah.
So it's easy for every mayor in a Democrat city, Washington, D.C., New York City, Philadelphia, to talk about a sanctuary city if there's no one in the sanctuary. But you bus in or plane in a few hundred migrants, they panic like they did in Martha's Vineyard. I've never seen people close the gates of a city faster than Martha's Vineyard. What's the Mayor Adams of New York, have to say about it?
I think the mayor at this point had enough. I think he's having buyer remorse with the sanctuary city thing, and he's complaining about it. He's saying we need to call a state of emergency. We need to fix the border crisis, and he's asking for more money from the federal government to help aid with the migrant crisis in New York City.
Eventually, this was going to come to a neighborhood near you. Having someone embedded is a good start. That came from the Secretary of Homeland Security. We want to thank him. But I've been very clear on what we need. We need to control the border. We need to call a state of emergency, and we need to properly fund this national crisis.
Like I said, a lot of the officials are I think they're having buyer remorse on the sanctuary city. Reason being is they can't really handle the situation. It's a city. We've ran out of locations to house these migrants. They're thinking about housing migrants in Central Park and building tents there like they're doing in other locations throughout New York City. But yeah, they're pissed. And like I said, I speak to a lot of them, and they're not happy with the situation.